Hey everyone! Welcome to the Otome.com podcast, where we dive deep into storytelling, creativity, and all things visual novel. I'm your host, Loverlance, and I'm joined by my co host, Sweet Pixel. Today, we've got a special episode lined up for you. We'll be exploring the amazing visual novel Keepers of Astraela, a game that blends rich fantasy with deep emotional themes. After our discussion about the game, we'll sit down with the brilliant minds behind Astraela, its developer Gwynne, and its writer Wrenna.
Keepers of Astraela is an intricate mix of real-world drama and high fantasy, so we're following Ava, our protagonist, as she navigates life, love, and her own internal darkness. The story introduces us to Emrys as well, a phoenix with a fiery personality, and a rich narrative filled with branching paths and multiple endings. The visual novel is based on Vision, the debut novel by Wrenna Stone, which adds even more depth to its storytelling. This combination of character-driven drama and immersive world building makes Astraela a truly captivating experience. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our guests for today's episode, Gwynne, the developer, and Wrenna, the writer. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So, story questions? I have one for Emrys, the Phoenix. He's a fantasy figure with a fiery personality. What was the thought process behind creating this character and his dynamic with Ava? So I'm assuming, Wrenna, this question is more towards you.
Thank you. Emrys, he was actually the first character that I ever wrote, even for the books, so he actually even predates Eva. I adore phoenixes, so when I started kicking around the idea of making a character with fire abilities, I knew I wanted him to be a human phoenix. And something kind of common in fantasy romance is a male lead that's like brooding, dark, morally gray, and a lot of times they're kind of cruel or a little mean to those around them. And I eat that up in fiction. I love it. But I wanted Emrys to take a little different direction, and he's very much like this puppy dog kind of golden retriever type character. And he's, very kind, always tries to do the right thing, which is kind of his fatal flaw because he would die for those around him before he'd do anything to help himself. He's vulnerable and hurting, but he would do anything to keep fighting, even if it means to, unfortunately, hide things from the people he loves the most.
I am totally on board with the morally gray characters. I can totally relate to that. So the game features two love interests, Emrys and Bobbi. How does their relationship with Ava differ in terms of emotional depth?
Bobbi has definitely known Eva for years, and at the start of the game, they're already best friends who they kind of know everything about one another, and they've been through a lot of life together. And so they're very bonded in a deep way, even before their romance can begin. Bobbi's definitely the person that Eva can go to for anything, and she leans on Bobbi a lot when things get rough. And she hasn't known Emrys quite as long, so while their bond really grows strong over this story, there's still a lot of unspoken things between them. Emrys is this fictionalized hero that Eva's put on a pedestal from day one. So she kind of finds out that fiction isn't always reality, so there's a little twist to their relationship there. And I won't spoil things, but there's definitely something that's revealed later on as to their bond and how it grows so strong so quickly. It's that love at first sight kind of thing where Bobbi's the person that Eva's gone through everything with, and so that really deep connection is already kind of there for them, and they just have to unlock it a little bit.
Okay. So for this next question, will Bobbi's full route coming in 2025 introduce new story elements? Or will it primarily expand on the existing plot? This relates to what you mentioned with working together in the future, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both there. We have a lot of really fun new story elements that come in the full route for her, and it kind of turns the entire story on its head. And some of the branches go right off of the existing story, and some bring the two elements kind of together. It's a really fun combination for Bobbi's route of new things and also branching off of what we've already built there.
Yeah. To add on to what Wrenna said, she wrote Vision in 3 acts, and the first act of the story will remain pretty much the same in Bobbi's route. You can think of that as sort of the equivalent of the common route that we see in Otome all the time. And then at the end of this first act, you'll be given a big choice. Do you go with Bobbi or do you go with Emrys? And then depending on what you choose, that'll split Act 2 into 2 kind of completely different stories. So I almost think of that as, Bobbi's route or Emrys's route. And then in Act 3, the stories will come back together.
I see. Well, I'm assuming that if you guys decide to add a bad ending in early game, I'm definitely going to somehow end up there, because I always manage to end up in the bad ending in the beginning. I'm sure that the choices I make are going to somehow lead me there again.
That's funny. You got the worst luck, I suppose.
I don't know how I do it. It's almost like it's on purpose, subconsciously, I suppose. Okay, Wrenna, so the world has a very rich lore and history. Did you perhaps draw inspirations from any specific myths or literature?
Aside from, I had a couple of very minor inspirations from Greek mythology and a little bit of, Dungeons and Dragons running in the back of my mind. It came from somewhere really deep in my mind that I'm not quite sure what sprouted it, but I'm sure there's definitely a lot of, other influences that have leaked out from my subconscious. And I'll probably look back in a few years and be like, hey, I think I had this movie in my mind, or this game was probably, in the back of my mind somewhere. But when I started creating Astraela, it was well after midnight, and by the time the sun rose, I had 10,000 words in a document of me just spilling ideas onto the page. So it was very spur of the moment, just throwing down ideas and seeing what stuck, and then going through the very messy process of sifting through it so that it made sense later on.
I see. Okay, this is for both of you. Who is your favorite character? I have to know, and why?
Very different. Hands down for me, Emrys is my baby. I definitely put elements of myself into each of the characters, but there's something about him where it felt like from day one, I was just pouring my soul onto the page, and his sense of humor and his good art in nature just always pulls me to him, even if all of his attempts at doing good things just fail hilariously. He's got this charm about him that makes him very addicting for me.
I really like Jensen. I have the biggest crush on him. I'm hanging on every word he says. I think he's so dreamy. I really do. As much as I love Bobbi and Eva, it's just Jensen is just kind of perfection.
I relate to that, by the way. I loved him as well.
Eva goes through writer's block in the story, something many writers can relate to.
I think the worst one that I ever went through was back in 2018. I had a couple of concussions, and it made it very hard for me to write for a while. And even when I wanted to start writing again, the writer's block was terrible. So I ended up not writing for a period of about 2 years until ironically, I started writing Vision, and that was what got me out of it. And I found that for me, when I get writer's block, 90% of the time it's because I get stuck on very small details. And I find that if there's a way that I can overcome that detail or skip past that detail, usually I can get going again. I'll crank out whole battle scene in one afternoon, and then I get stuck on, is the character drinking coffee or tea? And it'll throw me off for a whole week. So I've had to train myself to be okay, it's okay to skip over this line, and we'll go a few paragraphs down and we'll start again.
Lastly, I have to ask about this seriously messed up squirrel. What inspired that quirky detail, and what kind of reaction have you gotten from players about it?
Oh man, that was the messed up squirrel. I think it's a favorite for both of us. It was one of those when I was writing the book. It was a 2 a.m. brainchild of mine because I didn't know how to move the scene forward. And so I was I'm just going to throw an evil squirrel in there, and it's going to destroy the whole kitchen of Bobbi's apartment. And I didn't think it would stay in the book, and then it ended up I left it in and it became kind of a fan favorite. I know right now some of the reactions that we've gotten from players, and watching my friends play that scene has been hilarious. And even when I've played it on stream, like I can't get through that scene without absolutely dying laughing.
I think I have the same reaction, so it is totally understandable. I found it genuinely really funny. I was like, okay, this is definitely one of the questions that is going in there. I have to know. I think those were all of our questions. Do you guys want to add something or?
Sure. I'll kind of steal something I think that Wrenna said earlier, that community can be really, really helpful if you're new to this and you want to get into the dev side of things. When I was writing, I was in a writing Discord. When I'm doing more dev stuff, I'm in a dev Discord. There's, I think, an indie Otome one in particular. There's Dev Talk, which is a larger one for visual novels. So kind of go wherever it is you're working on right now and trying to be better at. And I don't spend a lot of time in the communities, because if I did, I wouldn't get anything done. But it's really nice to have a place to go and to ask questions and all these things and to get advice. I've definitely received a lot of really helpful advice over the years, people linking resources and all these things. And then I would say, hey, if you like Otome games and that's why you're listening to this broadcast, then Keepers of Astraela is a really good game. So maybe play that.
Wrenna, would you like to also add something, or do we just go to the closing remarks?
Yeah, I would definitely say for any writers who are looking to get into the visual novel community, definitely look into the community resources. It's a very welcome and open space. Everybody is super willing to help, and it's been a wonderful experience. And then just on the writing side in general, to silence that inner critic and not be quite so hard on yourself. Learn from the messed up squirrel that happened at 2 a.m, that even the most wild and out there ideas can become something that's most memorable, and just have fun with it and enjoy the ride.
Thank you both. That's going to be a wrap for today's episode. Gwynne, Wrenna, thank you both so much for joining us and giving us a glimpse into the world of Astraela. We can't wait to see what's in store, especially with Bobbi's route coming in 2025. And for all our listeners, if you haven't played the game yet, we highly recommend giving it a try. It's available on Steam, and we'll link the details in the description. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.